Hey, come here for a second.
What, Bob? What's going on?
Shh, keep it down.
I had to come back home in the middle of the night due to an urgent call from work. As I was trying to quietly make my way back to the bedroom on the second floor without waking up the family, Bob, my father-in-law, suddenly pulled me into the attic. I looked at him with a confused expression, not understanding what was happening.
Listen closely and try to hear what's going on downstairs.
What? Even though I was puzzled by his actions, I did as he said, and paid attention to the sounds from below. Then, I heard a strange noise I had never heard before. What on earth is that sound? After noticing the noise, I found a small gap where I could peek downstairs to see what was happening. What I saw through that gap was just as bizarre. What is this? What on earth is going on? As I trembled in fear at the sight.
Run now.
He whispered urgently, making sure the woman downstairs couldn't hear him. I decided to trust him and act. My name is Melissa McCarthy, and I'm a 38-year-old systems programmer. Hey, Thomas, what time do you think you'll be home from work today?
Well, things are pretty calm at work right now, so I should be able to leave on time.
That's great. It means we can all have dinner together tonight. Well, Bob, we're off to work now.
Take care and have a good day.
Thomas is my husband, and we got married 2 years ago. Right now, the three of us, Thomas, Bob, and I, are living together in Bob's house. We don't have any children. It's not that we dislike kids or don't want them. It's because I was in a car accident when I was younger.
It's been a while since I've gone out with you and Mom, Melissa.
Yes, it really has. I hope we can keep doing this kind of thing together from now on.
Several years ago, I was enjoying a drive with my parents, with my dad at the wheel. As long as we were all healthy, I thought we'd continue to do things like this. But then, tragedy struck without warning.
Look out.
What? Oh no, wait.
Oh no.
Suddenly, a car ran a red light and crashed head-on into us. The impact caused our car to flip over, and I lost consciousness. A witness must have called an ambulance. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. I immediately called for the doctor and nurse to ask about my parents' condition, but
I'm sorry to inform you, your parents didn't survive, and you, well.
What? What is it?
the doctor, struggling to find the right words, told me that my parents had passed away. But that wasn't all. He also explained my condition to me.
You see, your uterus was damaged.
What does that mean? Does it mean I won't be able to have children in the future?
It's not that you can't, but it will be much more difficult for you to conceive.
No. That can't be.
And so, I lost my parents in the accident, and the injuries left me unable to easily have children.
I've lost both my parents and the goal of becoming a mother.
When I was confronted with that reality, it was a huge shock. I didn't feel like doing anything, and at one point, I even thought about joining my parents. But as I was sorting through their belongings, I found photos of them smiling and other cherished memories, and I realized they would be heartbroken if I were to join them now.
I can't let it end like this. I still have my job, don't I?
Because I became infertile, I started to give up on the idea of romance, thinking, maybe I don't need it anymore. Instead, I threw myself into my work as a systems programmer, and before I knew it, I was almost 40. But my life took a turn 3 years ago, when I was 35.
Hello, I'm Thomas McCarthy from sales. Nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you too. That was how I met my husband. My first impression of him was that he was serious and sincere about his work. As someone who was also deeply engrossed in her work, I found Thomas's dedication to his job very appealing. Perhaps Thomas saw the same in me. We developed a good working relationship, but then one day Thomas suddenly said something unexpected.
Excuse me, would you like to go out for dinner with me sometime?
What? Excuse me, but don't you have a wife, Thomas? Thomas was 2 years older than me, 37 at the time. It wouldn't have been surprising if he were married. So, I asked just to be sure.
I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'm divorced. My previous marriage ended because of my infertility, so I'm single now.
Ah, I see. I felt a bit guilty for making him share that, but hearing his story made me feel like I could take a step forward. If that's the case, I don't have to worry about being blamed for not being able to have children, right? I had given up on romance because I feared being blamed by a man who wanted children, fearing emotional attacks. But knowing that Thomas had a similar struggle made me think that we could share our burdens and support each other. All right, I'd love to go to dinner with you. And so, I accepted Thomas's invitation for a date. Even in our private conversations, I found Thomas's stories interesting, and I started to believe that life with him could be enjoyable. As we spent more time together, we naturally grew closer, and Thomas eventually confessed his feelings, leading to our relationship. Then, a year later, when I was 36,
Melissa, I love you. We may never have kids, but will you marry me?
Thomas looked straight at me as he proposed, so my answer was clear. Actually, I became infertile due to an accident years ago, so I'm okay with not having kids, as long as I have you, Thomas. Most people probably think, when I get married, I want to have kids. In that sense, infertility can be a significant barrier to marriage. But we both laid bare our vulnerabilities and were able to marry with the understanding that we were okay with a life without children. I thought that would be the start of my happy new life.
I wish Mom could have seen how happy we are together.
I wish I could show this to my parents too. This was the conversation my husband and I had during our wedding. His mother had passed away 2 years before the wedding. I had heard stories of how she doted on him before she passed. I wondered if he might have had a bit of a mommy's boy side to him. But then again, I felt the same way about cherishing my parents. I kept telling myself that, trying not to overthink things. Now, about where we're living after getting married. As I mentioned earlier, the three of us, Thomas, Bob and I are living together in Bob's house. It was my husband's wish to live with his father.
Melissa, if I move out, Dad will be all alone.
Yeah, I guess so.
He's getting old, and I'm worried about him. So, I'm sorry, but could we live together with him?
Live together, okay, I'm fine with that. To be honest, I hesitated a little when I heard we'd be living with Bob. I had thought about enjoying a quiet life, just the two of us. That's what I was thinking. However, my parents have already passed away, and I can no longer do anything for them. So, I understood my husband's desire to do something for his father, and I decided to accept his request. And there was another reason besides wanting to respect my husband's desire to do something for his father. I thought that since my husband was such a kind and serious person, his father must be similar. If that were the case, I thought I'd be able to get along well with him even if we lived together. But thinking so optimistically was my first mistake. What's going on? I feel restless and can't sleep. Some people can sleep in their own beds just fine but can't sleep when they're in a new environment. However, I've never had trouble sleeping when staying at my grandparents' house or a hotel while traveling. But for some reason, I always felt restless when sleeping at Bob's house. It wasn't just because I was using a different bed or pillow. I think my relationship with Bob was also affecting me. I felt like he was keeping his distance from me. But I couldn't understand why. Bob, excuse me, can I talk to you for a moment?
Sorry, I'm busy right now. Let's talk later.
All right. Whenever I tried to talk to him like this, he would avoid me, saying he was busy, or end the conversation quickly with a simple yeah or okay, as if he was avoiding interacting with me. Did I do something wrong to him? I felt there must be a reason for his attitude, but I couldn't think of anything. Maybe my husband knew something. But by the time we had been married for a year, my husband's attitude towards me had become distant as well. Hey Thomas, has your dad always been quiet or had trouble interacting with people?
Huh? Why are you asking that?
It's just, I feel like he's avoiding me or there's some distance between us.
How would I know? Maybe it's something you did. Stop bothering me with that.
What, Thomas, what's gotten into you? By the time we had been married for a year, my husband had lost the kindness he had before our marriage, and started treating me harshly with rough words. My husband's changes were only going to get worse, and the reason Bob was distancing himself from me, unlike my husband, was actually justified, but I wouldn't realize this until later. It wasn't just my husband's harsh words that made me feel something was off. If he decided something wasn't needed, he would throw it away, even if it was mine. Among the things he discarded were items I cherished. Hey Thomas, have you seen the stuffed animal my parents gave me? It's really important to me.
Oh, that dirty thing. I threw it out ages ago. You're too old to be holding onto stuffed animals anyway.
What? That stuffed animal was a precious gift from my parents. My husband's behavior became more and more outrageous. if this keeps up, I'll have to hide anything important where Thomas can't see it. That's what I thought as I started organizing my belongings. Then it happened.
Melissa, can I talk to you for a moment? This stuffed animal, it's yours, right?
Oh, yes, it is. I'm so glad you found it.
Yeah, I saw Thomas taking it somewhere.
I see. Thank you so much. You really saved me. Thanks to Bob, I managed to get my cherished stuffed animal back. He's actually kind-hearted. Given the distance he had kept from me, I never expected him to retrieve it for me. There must be a reason for the way he's treated me. I was certain of that. I was hopeful that we could build a good relationship from here on out. But just when I started thinking that way, fate had other plans, and things took a sudden turn.
Huff, huff, og.
Bob, are you okay? Hang in there. One day, Bob suddenly complained of feeling unwell. His complexion was pale, and I ended up taking him to the hospital. After a checkup, no illness was immediately found, but he was admitted for further tests as a precaution. I informed my husband about this. But instead of showing concern, he said something I couldn't believe.
If they find something, the doctors will treat him, right? It's got nothing to do with me.
What? Didn't we move in with him because you were worried about his health? My husband's words were clearly contradictory to what he had said when we first got married. Was he really this cold-hearted all along? Where did the kind man I married go? I was shocked by how much he had changed, but things were about to get even worse. A few days later, while I was out shopping, I saw my husband in town. At first, I hesitated to call out to him and just observed.
Catherine, you're so cute.
Oh, stop, Thomas, you're too much.
What? Is that what I think it is? My husband was walking arm in arm with a woman, laughing and chatting like they were a couple. Their actions seemed like those of a couple, but something felt off as I watched. It was the age of the woman with my husband. I wasn't sure of her exact age, since I'd never seen her before, but she looked noticeably older than my husband. Could she be a relative I don't know about? Or was it, as it appeared, a case of infidelity? Either way, Thomas's behavior is suspicious. If I let it go, I'll just be left in doubt and frustration. I'd rather know the truth. With that in mind, I decided to hire a private detective. Bob's condition, my husband's behavior, and other things that worried me were becoming more and more intense, and I spent every day without any peace of mind. Then I received a call from the hospital where Bob was hospitalized. They said that the test results were in, so I immediately headed over to the hospital and heard what the doctor had to say.
Please stay calm as you listen. Your father-in-law is in the terminal stages of cancer, and he likely has about 2 years left.
No, it can't be.
I suspected as much.
I was shocked by the doctor's diagnosis, but Bob seemed strangely calm. Could it be that he already knew something was wrong with his body? He was so composed that it made me think so. Shortly after Bob's test results came out, The detective agency contacted me to say that they had also received their findings. I was hoping that the woman I saw was just a close relative, an aunt or someone else, and not an affair. I didn't want to accept the harsh reality, so I prayed that the possibilities would be in my favor, but
We have the results. To get straight to the point, your husband is having an affair.
no, it can't be. My hopes were shattered as the investigator confirmed that my husband was indeed cheating. I had to face reality, so I looked at the photos laid out before me. Wait, isn't this a different woman from before? The woman I saw earlier was older, but the woman in these photos was much younger. They were clearly not the same person. Could it be that my husband was cheating with multiple women? Whatever the case, he betrayed me. I can't forgive such a betrayal. Honestly, I thought about divorcing him, but with Bob battling terminal cancer. If I divorce him now, Bob might have to fight his illness alone. Considering that possibility, I decided it would be better to prioritize Bob's care and postpone the divorce. Bob, how are you feeling?
I'm doing better today. I'm sorry to keep worrying you.
No, it's okay. As I observed him, it didn't seem like he needed full-time care yet. But with a terminal diagnosis, his condition could worsen at any time. I wanted to be with him as much as possible in case that happened.
Catherine, dear,
Thomas, over here.
There he goes again. He just never stops, does he? My husband was still completely engrossed in his affair. Whether through the private investigator's reports or my own observations, the evidence of his infidelity kept piling up, and I was beyond exasperated. I can't rely on Thomas to take care of Bob anymore. I had completely lost trust in my husband, so while he was off with his mistress, I was the one looking after Bob. But then, a few weeks later, there was an issue at work. My boss contacted me, saying they needed urgent help, and asked if I could come in. I was worried about Bob, but my boss sounded desperate, so it had to be serious. Thinking that, I rushed to the office. When I arrived, I saw my boss and colleagues working frantically, so I checked in with my boss to get an update. Following their instructions, I got to work and helped resolve the issue. It turned out to be more challenging than I expected, but thanks to everyone's cooperation, we managed to fix it, and I was finally able to head home. It's gotten so late. By the time I finished work and got home, it was already the middle of the night. I quietly unlocked the door and entered the house, careful not to wake Bob. I thought I'd head straight to the bedroom on the second floor and finally get some rest. But just as I was about to open the bedroom door,
Melissa, come here.
"Hawk Bob, what's going on?"
Shh, keep quiet.
I was surprised that he was still awake, but even more surprised when he led me somewhere. He dragged me into the attic, which we used for storage, and even closed the door behind us. "Bob, what's going on?"
Listen closely and pay attention to the sounds downstairs.
"What?" I was confused by his actions, but I did as he said and listened carefully to what was happening below. sure enough, I heard a strange noise that I had never heard before. What is this sound? Noticing the noise, I realized I could see through a gap in the door and peeked down. What I saw was bizarre. A woman, who looked like my husband's mistress, was walking down the hallway with a crazed expression.
Melissa, where are you? I won't forgive the woman who tries to seduce Thomas.
What? Is she looking for me? It seemed clear that her target wasn't my husband, but me. I could hear the resentment in her voice so clearly that it sent a shiver down my spine. Gulp. Could it be that she's after my life? Judging by her behavior, it seemed likely. I instinctively felt the danger and held my breath. Oh no, what should I do? I was paralyzed with fear and confusion, but seeing my distress, he spoke up.
You can't stay here. She could show up any moment. Run!
What? But if I leave, what about you, Bob?
Don't worry about me. Just make sure you don't see Thomas until the divorce is final. That's all that matters right now.
All right, I understand. I realized that he was doing everything he could to protect me. To honor that, I knew I needed to focus on keeping myself safe. I couldn't afford to rush out and accidentally run into the mistress. So, I waited and watched her movements.
Tisk, I'll find you someday, Melissa.
She spat out those words in frustration and left.
Phew, she's gone. Melissa, take this. Then, you need to leave the house immediately.
Okay, I understand. With that, I took the letter he handed me and quickly left the house. Afterward, I filed for divorce through a lawyer I had already arranged, and I also demanded compensation for the affair. The private investigator's report revealed that my husband had been cheating during work hours, too. When I informed his company of this, he was fired. Once the divorce was finalized, we met to settle the compensation.
Even if we're divorced, I'll be fine with Catherine. Besides, I'm about to come into a lot of money, so I'll pay you the alimony, whatever.
Well, thank you. Despite his bravado, my ex-husband paid the alimony in full. And for some reason, his mistress was there too.
What a fool you are to let Thomas go.
She said that with a smug smile on her face. Still, she looks older in person than in the photos. She seemed to think she had won, but I never even saw it as a competition. I didn't care at all. They could say whatever they wanted. I was more distracted by how much older she looked in person compared to the photos. 2 years later, Bob passed away after a long battle with his illness. I attended the funeral, but
Finally, this day has come. What a wait it's been.
is that Thomas? Even at his own father's funeral, he made such an inappropriate comment. Not only that, but he looked completely different from 2 years ago, emaciated and almost unrecognizable.
I paid Melissa the alimony because I thought I'd be getting a big payout soon. But I had to wait 2 whole years. Stupid old man.
Hey, Thomas, that's enough. Do you even realize what you're saying?
Some of his relatives, who were at the funeral, couldn't stand hearing any more of his offensive remarks and tried to stop him.
Oh, come on. Thomas has been through a lot too, you know?
Huh? You. Why are you here?
It was his mistress who had appeared, and the moment his relatives saw her, they were shocked into silence. The reason for their reaction became clear after we moved to the crematorium. Everyone seemed shocked to see Catherine. What's going on with her? When I asked my ex-husband's relatives about it, they turned a bit pale before explaining the reason.
So, her name is Catherine. I thought she was Yasmin for a moment, and it shocked me.
Yasmin.
Yes, Yasmin was Thomas's mother. I guess you never met her, Melissa.
No, she had already passed away by the time we got married. But their story gave me some insight into why the mistress looked so old. Well, whatever. Catherine's story doesn't matter to me now. I figured my ex-husband might start causing a scene soon over a certain matter. And sure enough, he did.
Come on, skip the boring stuff and the ceremony. Just hand over the inheritance already.
His hopes for a big payday rested on his father's inheritance. He was acting all excited, convinced it was finally coming his way. This was my chance to hit him with a reality check. Sorry to disappoint you, Thomas, but things won't go your way. Your dad left a will.
A will?
Yes, I was adopted by your father, so I'm the one inheriting everything.
What? You've got to be kidding.
I had expected him to complain when I told him this, and sure enough, he did. But considering all the selfish things he'd done, he had no right to complain at all. Who's kidding who? You ignored your father while you were out cheating, and now you want to act all high and mighty.
Oh, damn it.
I glared at him and called him out, and he couldn't say anything in response. He just bit his lip in frustration and fell silent. At that point, only his mistress was left to comfort him.
Don't worry, Thomas. I'll take care of you.
She said that while clinging to him and trying to console him. Up until now, she had spoken in a tone that suggested she was younger than him, but this time, something was different. Could it be? I suddenly remembered the letter Bob had left behind. What was written in it was almost unbelievable.
I have a sixth sense. Thomas's mistress, Catherine, is possessed by the spirit of my late wife, Yasmin.
When I first read it, I thought, no way, but now, seeing her hugging my ex-husband, her actions and words were exactly like his mother's. So that's why she looked so different in person compared to the photos. Photos capture the real world, so they wouldn't show a ghost, only the young woman's real appearance. That's probably what was happening. But depending on who was looking, like me, Bob, or his relatives, they saw her as she appeared while possessed by his mother's spirit. That's why she looked older. Bob also mentioned the reason behind my ex-husband's first divorce, before he married me.
Thomas's first divorce was because of Yasmin. She was obsessed with Thomas and tormented his first wife, leading to the divorce.
I had heard that his mother doted on him. But I never imagined it went this far. I was utterly horrified by the whole situation. Even now, after her death, my mother-in-law is still obsessed with my ex-husband, possessing his mistress.
Thomas did nothing wrong. The one to blame is this woman.
What is she even talking about? Could it be that the mistress has some sort of sensitivity to spirits? The whole thing was so eerie that it sent chills down my spine. Is this the result of their bad actions catching up with them? Seeing how her personality seemed to merge with my mother-in-law's, that was the only thought that came to mind. It seemed clear that the woman standing in front of me was indeed possessed by my mother-in-law, but this wasn't the first time it had happened. In the letter Bob left behind, he mentioned that it wasn't the mistress who appeared that night, but my mother-in-law. She had grown impatient with my hesitation to divorce, and tried to eliminate me. It's pitiful that the mistress has become so deeply possessed by her. Thinking about it, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. But Bob had also noted that the mistress only approached my ex-husband for money, so there was no need for sympathy. 5 years passed after that. When I visited Bob's grave on the anniversary of his death, I ran into my ex-husband's relatives. We started talking, and naturally, the topic of my ex-husband came up.
On the day of the funeral, Catherine, was it? She said she'd take care of Thomas like Yasmin did. But it seemed she didn't have any money of her own.
So, where are they living now?
In a cardboard house by the river.
I see. Given how they were 5 years ago, it's no surprise they ended up homeless. It's a natural progression after everything that happened. But surprisingly, they didn't seem to regret their situation at all.
Apparently, they weren't even aware of how bad their life was. They laughed as if they were living in a mansion.
Wait, is that okay?
Of course not. We couldn't just leave them like that, causing trouble for everyone. So, we worked with the other relatives to have them committed to a mental hospital.
I see. That must have been tough on all of you. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for the relatives to get him into the hospital. I'm sure it wasn't easy. But as soon as my ex-husband was admitted, he suddenly went mad. The mistress changed just as drastically and was also committed to the same mental hospital. At this point, I doubt either of them can return to normal. I feel for the doctors and nurses who have to deal with them, but I hope their care can minimize the damage those two might cause. As a side note, in the letter Bob wrote to me, he mentioned that my parents were protecting me. Considering how I survived that car accident years ago, it's quite possible. But if Bob hadn't helped me escape 7 years ago, I might not be here today. Thinking about it that way, perhaps Bob has been protecting me too. He didn't mention it in his letter, but I'm sure of it. To bring peace to the 3 who are watching over me from heaven, I'm determined to live a happy life from now on.